charismatic personality. We looked at a poll yesterday. 67% of Americans say they want to vote against Trump. 67% of Biden, like likely Biden voters, say they're voting against Trump, and 33% say they're voting for Biden. That percentage is damn near identical to 2020. That wasn't because Brandon was the guy, even though MSNBC and CNN and all these other liberal institutions that are fraudulent and did not want Bernie Sanders because they were terrified of even moderate social democratic progress, wanted to put an institutional cadaver in a position of power instead, and constantly presented Joe Biden as the guy who can beat Trump, the only guy who can beat Trump. But at the time, the polls showed the exact same reality. No one was voting for Biden because he was a dynamo. No one was voting for Biden because they genuinely love Biden. People were voting for return to normalcy. People were voting for competency. And throughout the past 4 years, Joseph Robinette Biden demonstrated slowly but surely that he is, his faculties are diminished and it's not actually normal. It's not business as usual. And also that he is kind of incompetent. That's one of the biggest aspects. That's the biggest selling point for Brandon. Ideology that is causing people to fucking go out and vote for him. It's just like they want competency and they want a Democrat because Trump represents chaos and Biden is an old school politician. In 2020 they still saw all of that and were voting against Donald Trump. 2024 comes around, those percentages haven't moved. That does not spell people love the past 4 years of the Brandon administration. If you're in power for 4 years and people are still like, yeah, I guess I'm voting against Donald Trump, then, you haven't really done much, or rather, you haven't really communicated what you've done well enough. Both of these things are true to a certain degree. That's where we're at with the situation.
Now, interestingly, I'm also told that in this private conversation yesterday, the president was also chastened and blamed himself, not his staff, for his poor debate performance. He said, I have done too much foreign policy, according to this ally that I spoke with, and he acknowledged that the back-to-back foreign trips that he had leading up to Thursday night's debate had been a mistake. We, of course, heard the president saying that at a fundraiser.
Yeah, also claiming that you're the underdog when you're the incumbent president running for re-election is so funny. That's literally also very Trumpian, which is seemingly what the Brandon re-election campaign has been so far. Turn orange, bring your dumbass fail son into the White House with meetings, inappropriately bringing them into meetings with staffers, and also incredibly reactionary immigration policy, and last but not least, portray yourself as the underdog. Donald Trump in his re-election kept trying to present himself as an outsider. He kept trying to be like, I'm gonna make America great again. It's like, bro, you already were the president. Like, you're still the president right now. What do you mean make America great again? And then they tried to revamp it and try to do CAG, keep America great, and that didn't work. So then he went back to make America great again. And it's like, okay, so you're admitting that ain't great. Like, that was a swing and a miss for the Trump administration. And that's the thing, like, you can't really present yourself as an underdog when you're running as an incumbent. You just have to rest on the laurels of your success.
And as you mentioned, there are other efforts coming in the campaign, in the White House as well, as a lot of folks, a lot of staffers, aides that are working in the campaign in the White House are really worried about the future of the 2024 campaign. We know that White House Chief of Staff Jeff Zients also had a White House aides call trying to bring some sort of reassurance given the events of the last several days. And we are expecting here White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre to take the podium any minute. And of course, all of this is coming with the new reporting that President Biden has privately acknowledged to an ally that he understands that the next couple of days, the next stretch of days is going to be incredibly important in terms of whether or not he can actually save his candidacy. And what I think is interesting, Boris, to note is that we are seeing the president finally starting to get a little bit more involved himself in the conversations that he is having in private with lawmakers. He is, of course, hosting some Democratic governors who had expressed concerns about his age and the viability of his candidacy. And then, of course, there's that big interview that he is doing on Friday with ABC News, not to mention the press conference that the White House has been talking about that he will participate in next week at the NATO Summit. So we'll see how the White House answers.
This is so funny because he's going to knock out the ABC interview. He might have one kind of off moment, but he's going to cook up the ABC interview, and then every one of the most annoying Democratic Party mouthpieces are going to chirp about it endlessly. Meanwhile, it's not going to move the needle. 80% of the country think he's too old. What a ridiculous crock of shit this is, dude. The only reason why Biden isn't dropping out currently is because it's not even that he wants to go through the finish line, it's that he wants to qualify. They're trying to push his through the qualifiers so that he can't be a replacement, so that there's no contest, that there's no replacement opportunity whatsoever, and every day that passes by is another day wasted. The thing is, if you've been watching this, as I have, and as many in this community has, you already know that they've been running the clock. The problem is now the media can't hide it any longer. They're not even interested in hiding it any longer. They're just lasering him. And that's the problem now for the Democratic Party and for the Biden re-election. Their campaign strategy thus far quite literally was to stop Biden from having too many press moments because they knew what it was. They knew that they were rolling out a carcass. By the way, that was the campaign strategy for the 2020 election as well, the primaries. And then he won the election because COVID happened. Like God was helping him. It wasn't just Jim Clyburn. It was God, okay? It was a once in a lifetime biblical style like pandemic epidemiological incident, dude. What are we talking about? I've never seen someone get so many hard carries. And then Roe v. Wade happens. Finally, Donald Trump Supreme Court turns around and actually follows through on their 35-year project, their 40-year project, their massive commitment to undermining women's bodily autonomy. And then the midterms that are supposed to be a red wave because of negative real wage growth that Americans experienced for 2 years for the most part, all of a sudden turns into a battle for civil liberties and bodily autonomy for women. Boom. Another hard carry. Not a single one of these instances was Joe Biden's doing. Joe Biden is not God. He didn't make COVID. Joe Biden is not himself securing the South Carolina primary vote. Joe Biden won Super Tuesday after getting carried by the entire Democratic Party primary candidates dropping out to endorse him after phone calls from Barack Obama. He got carried by Obama in that situation. So no, I think people need to recognize something fundamentally important here. It's not just that Joe Biden is old. Joe Biden is a failure. Like personally, sure, his administration I would consider to be significantly more progressive, with the exception of Israel. Do not start with that. Obviously, but on the domestic front, Joe Biden is probably one of the most pro-labor contemporary politicians out there, if not the most pro-labor. These are statements that I felt confident making before October 7th. On moments where we talk about labor policy, on moments where we talk about like Biden's domestic policy prescription, with the exception of immigration, which is yet another insane flub from Brandon because he's an absolute dumbass. Ultimately, beyond the legislative agenda being more progressive than Barack Obama's, even by a wide margin, especially as it pertains to labor, ultimately he's a bad politician, dude. He's not a good politician. He was floated into the VP position because he's a gaffe guy, because he was known for kissing babies as a retail politician and doing gaffes. He was a goofy, somewhat racist old white guy. And if you recall, as I have told you, vice presidential picks are supposed to be a good counter. What are your areas of weakness? If you're Barack Hussein Obama, well, it's the fact that you're black. That's a pretty big hurdle for a lot of white supremacist Americans to clear. And when I say white supremacist Americans, I'm not saying like the Klan robe wearers, okay? I'm saying like your uncle or your grandparents who never forgave Obama for fucking up the country. That's because he was black. They hated him because he was black. That's it. I hate him for good reasons. They hate him because he's black and Kenyan and a Muslim. I love him because he's Kenyan and Muslim. My point is, Biden was elevated to the position of VP, which gave him the additional bona fides, the additional confidence from the black voting bloc in South Carolina as Obama's vice president. But the real reason why he was picked as Obama's vice president, another moment of elevation in his political career, full of L's. Anytime Biden has put himself out there on his own, he's taken L's. Specifically on pure politics, Joe Biden is a bad politician because he is a hack. What do I mean by this? Comedians who are hacks do one thing. They repeat bottom of the barrel, lowest common denominator jokes. Politicians who are hacks do a similar thing in the realm of politics. They look at focus testing and they go for smack dab in the middle of that and consistently retriangulate their position right into the center. That is Biden to a T.